Hello, so we just got back to Utah. We're excited to be here. Not excited for the super hot weather, but we really enjoyed Colorado. We got our federal parks annual pass and we're here at Arches. Looking forward to checking out some of the arches. Arches is one of the national parks that span southern Utah. Known as the Mighty Five, these parks include Arches, Canyonlands, Capitol Reef, Bryce Canyon, and Zion. These parks were actually one of the main reasons why Rebecca and I wanted to get on the road, and be outdoors and in nature, and so we were really happy to be checking out Arches. With 5 parks, our plan was to see them in the span of 3 days, with Arches on the first day, since we got there in the afternoon, and then Canyonlands and Capitol Reef on the second day, and then Bryce and Zion on the third day. Getting out of Denver and driving into southern Utah, it really did feel like we were driving to the middle of nowhere. But as soon as you get into the areas where the national parks are, all the rocks start turning a little bit more red and orange, and it was just really cool to see kind of what the National Park Service has been able to preserve. Something that really impressed Rebecca and I was just how well maintained all the parks were, starting with Arches, just like the paved roads, the cleanliness, the facilities that were available, and the resources that we as visitors had to explore the park were really, really awesome. In the few hours that we were there, we were able to see balanced rock, double arch, delicate arch through the viewpoint, and that's like the really famous arch that you see on like the Utah license plates. We saw landscape arch, and then we did part of the Devil's Garden Trail, and we were able to see tunnel arch and pine tree arch. And I think it was kind of funny as we continued driving down the road just how many arches there were. I think there's like over 2,000 documented arches in the park, and it was cool to see just how unique they were and read more about like how they formed and things like that. As we finished our last hike though, and we're packing up, getting ready to leave the park, we had a little unexpected surprise. Oh my goodness. It just started raining out of nowhere.
The visibility is so low. It's so aggressive.
There you go.
Oh my goodness. You can see the rain like flying in the wind.
So luckily we were on our way out of the park when it started to pour, and by the time we got out of the park and got to our campsite for the night, the rain was pretty much gone. And so, like a theme throughout the rest of our time through the national parks, we were incredibly blessed to have wonderful weather. It wasn't too hot, wasn't too cold. Let's check in with Rebecca. So here we are at the end of our day, just enjoying a quick dinner right after the sun has set. You want to tell us a little bit about what we did today?
Yeah, so this morning we actually started out in Colorado. Feels like so long ago. But we left Littleton this morning, drove about 5 hours to Moab, Utah, and spent about 5 hours in Arches National Park, and it was super nice. Sorry, there's a car out back there, but anyways, we just explored some of the trails, took a lot of great pictures that we'll get to show you, and now we just found a BLM site and are gonna camp here for the night. Hopefully be able to use the van, so that'll be fun. But yeah.
We'll keep you updated. All right, so the next morning we packed up the van after a good night's rest and made the drive over to Canyonlands. This actually ended up being, I think, my favorite park. And yeah, I'm just trying to talk right now so that I can show you all the wonderful pictures and videos that we got. But there was a lot to see here. We were specifically in the district called Island in the Sky. I think it's broken up into 3 or 4 districts, and so it's a pretty expansive park, but kind of given our rigid and strict timeline, we could really only choose to kind of see the biggest things on the list. But I really enjoyed our half day here. We took this hike called the Grand Viewpoint, and it basically took us along the edge of the canyon about 2 miles out, I believe. And there was just this spectacular view at the end. Just panoramic from kind of one side over to the other side. Not too many people decided to make the trek all the way down too, and so it wasn't as crowded, and I think it was just a really breathtaking opportunity for us. But yeah, in addition to that, we were able to see the Mesa Arch, go to the Green River Overlook, take some other good pictures, have lunch. And that was kind of the end of our half day before we headed over to Capitol Reef. Honestly, it was a little sad to leave the park only after a few hours, but given our tight schedule, like I said, we had to move on. Capitol Reef, I think, ended up being one of Rebecca's favorite parks, and it's actually one of the least visited out of the Mighty Five. I remember as we were driving into the park, probably about like 15-30 minutes before we got there, there was like some thunderstorms, some lightning, and so we weren't really sure how bad it was, but it ended up raining a little bit while we were there. It ended up being not too bad since it was already a little warm that day. A little bit of rain cooled us down, and we were able to explore Hickman Bridge, take some really cool pictures. Because of the rain, there weren't too many people out as well, and so again, it just felt nice to be out in nature, kind of more alone. And definitely I think Capitol Reef is one of the parks that we would want to go back to again in the future, since we weren't able to see as much as we wanted. So originally our plan was to camp the 3 nights while we were in the national parks, but kind of last minute while we were in Colorado, after we got out of camping 2 nights in Wyoming, we decided that we wanted to kind of break that up. And so we ended up spending the second night at an Airbnb in the middle of nowhere. But I think that decision was super smart on our part, and it was definitely worth it to have that hot shower and warm bed for the night before we kind of continued on our way to Bryce Canyon. So Bryce Canyon became one of our favorite parks that we saw throughout our trip. But both Bryce Canyon and Zion, the last 2 parks on our road trip itinerary, are probably 2 of the most visited parks among the Mighty Five. Just because of their proximity to like California and Nevada, and they ended up being the most crowded on our trip. Bryce Canyon is famous for its hoodoos, which are the large kind of rock formations that you see throughout the park. Bryce Amphitheater is the most famous kind of area of the park, and that's where we kind of focused most of our viewpoints and our hikes. And actually the main area that we explored was between Sunset Point and Sunrise Point, and there's this kind of combination loop that goes between them. It's about a 3-mile hike. And yeah, it was just super breathtaking to be able to see the amphitheater and the view from the get-go, and to actually go down into it and walk all the way through and back up. We were able to take a lot of cool pictures here, and it was probably one of our favorite hikes in addition to the one at Canyonlands. After we hiked through the amphitheater, it was getting a little later in the afternoon, and so a lot more people started arriving, and so we were able to check out Inspiration Point, which is another viewpoint before we headed out to Zion. But I think if you only have like a day or an afternoon, or could only make a short stop, I would definitely recommend stopping at Bryce, since there's a lot to see without going too far in the park. But with that, Rebecca and I drove over to our last national park on the trip, which is Zion. Like I said before, Zion National Park was our last stop in our tour across the Mighty Five. Even more than Bryce, this was definitely the most packed and crowded national park, and we realized that as soon as we drove into the visitor center and actually had to look for parking. As a result of being so crowded, the National Park Service actually decided to limit where you could actually drive with cars, so much of the park is only accessible by shuttle. We didn't know that when we were planning, so unfortunately we weren't able to see too much of the park. We did the Watchman Trail, and it gave us a really good overlook into the visitor center and kind of down through a canyon. And so we definitely recommend that, although it was one of the longer hikes. We were able to drive the scenic kind of Zion Mount Carmel highway. It kind of goes through the canyon, and that was super cool. But with that, we headed out to look for a campsite for our last night in the van. Wow, okay. It's been a couple days since we've checked in, but we've made really good use of that time. We actually just got to our campsite for the night in Utah, and we just finished hitting the Mighty Five national parks in the last 3 days. And so we went to Arches, as you saw, and then we went to Canyonlands, and then Capitol Reef, and then Bryce Canyon, and then Zion. And so it's been really busy the past few days. A ton of hiking, but it's been super beautiful. We're super excited to share with you some pictures and our experiences and things like that.
Yeah, the past couple days have been kind of crazy, but as Josiah mentioned, it's been super beautiful. I really enjoyed Capitol Reef, which is one of the least popular ones, but I thought it was super pretty and really unique. And yeah, I mean, I'm pretty tired because we hiked like 6 miles today, but I am excited to also share with you guys. Besides, took a ton of good pictures, so hopefully those will turn out nice. And yeah.
Yeah, I think we've been talking a lot about like our thoughts on the different parks. I think if you don't know too much about them, it's kind of confusing. And so we thought it would be cool to share some pictures, photos and videos, and share a little bit more of our experiences with each of the parks if you guys ever think about checking the area out. But we're getting ready, we'll make dinner, get some rest for the night, and then tomorrow we'll be driving back west over to Las Vegas, where we'll be spending a few nights there. So looking forward to a good shower. Okay, so in terms of cooking while camping, you could always get these types of things, like the freeze-dried meals that you just add water to, and these are super easy. But we've been really liking these kinds of things. They're called like pasta side somewhere, sidekicks other places. It's basically like pasta, but you just like throw the whole bag in, boil it, and then we add like a little bit of butter, cheese, and like canned meat, and it gets you pretty close to having real food in the middle of nowhere. All right, so it's the next morning. We made it through the night. We're just leaving the Zion Visitor Center, to the bathroom. Everything is all set to go. We're ending our camping, I guess part of our trip with the national parks, and we're headed to Vegas.